And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. Today, it is a hot one outside. It's pretty hot here in Chicago. So I mentioned last week that I was going to have a guest on the podcast, but since it's so hot outside, I didn't think it was a good idea to have him drive out here in the blistering heat. Because, I like this guy. I don't want him to die of dehydration. Or just, be really, crappy friend and tell him your friends to come out and record a podcast with you in the blazing heat. So I didn't want to do that to him. So hopefully I can have him on the podcast later on. But I am recording this podcast earlier like I usually did. Like I did last week. I'm recording it a little earlier than I usually do for one reason. Comic-Con. So Comic-Con is going on probably by the time you're listening to this. Of course, movie studios have been toning it down on movie news because they're going to be releasing a lot of stuff over at Comic-Con. So I'm just, looks like the news cycle is taking it easy just for a little bit. But speaking of Comic-Con, so this is my first podcast with Comic-Con going on, I have decided to hold off on some of the Comic-Con news for the podcast. I will instead do a podcast next week devoted to Comic-Con news. Probably, I'm not saying this just yet. Well, I'm saying on the podcast, but I don't know what's going to happen. There may be two podcasts next week. One devoted to Comic-Con and the other one devoted to whatever movie news comes out afterwards. I'm not definitive on that yet. Maybe I'll just combine the two and have one really long podcast next week. I don't know yet. You'll find out, obviously. But yeah, so no real Comic-Con news in this podcast because I want to keep all the Comic-Con news together, and that's pretty much the plan. So let's get right to the movie news this week. I do want to start off with a sad note, unfortunately. One of the great directors, creators, and person in general from the stories that have been coming out since this news came out. Director Gary Marshall has passed away, and it was kind of a really shitty way to start off the week, really. So he was again, director, he was a writer, he was a producer, he was an actor. He did it all. He created he created pretty much some of the most popular and staples of TV show history in the 70s and 80s. He created and directed and wrote, and I think he even starred in a couple episodes of The Odd Couple. He created Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, Joni Loves Chachi, and of course the big one, Happy Days. And when it comes to his acting roles, he appeared in some of the shows he created and wrote. He was also in movies like Orange County, the TV show Murphy Brown, Never Been Kissed, and A League of Their Own. Now when it comes to directing, he's directed some pretty big staples and stuff that has put people on the map. He's directed Pretty Women, Runaway Bride. He directed The Princess Diaries and the sequel. And this later half of his career, this kind of his last three movies, he's directed these ensemble, interconnected. That's not the word I really wanted to use, but I'll go with it now. Movies like Valentine's Day, New Year's Eve, and Mother's Day. So he's stuck to that, and again, he put some people on the map. He gave Robin Williams a chance to shine and help launch his career. Julia Roberts and Anne Hathaway, their stars just rose at a phenomenal rate with Gary Marshall, with Julia Roberts being in Pretty Woman, and Anne Hathaway being in The Princess Diaries. He just did so much for the industry and for a lot of people. And, all the stories that have been coming out of the actors that have worked with him, of the people that just worked with him in general, have been just really, really heartwarming and touching. It always sucks, it always sucks when we lose someone. And it's also, even though we probably don't know these people personally, for us, we have their legacy of the things they've done and the things that we grew up watching, or the things that we quote all the time, or whatever. It's one of those hard pill to swallow. It's probably not the right expression to use, but that's the one I'm going with. So it sucks, and obviously my thoughts and prayers go out to his family, and he will surely be missed amongst the whole community of movie lovers and goers, and of course people in the industry that of course knew him personally as well. All right, so I just wanted to start the podcast. It's always it's not good when we lose people and we have to talk about it. It's kind of a somber note to talk to to start the podcast off with, but I didn't want to end the podcast with a somber note either, really. So, yeah. All right, so let's get to one particular piece that came out last week after the podcast went up. That when I read it, I was like, this has to be a joke, and it turns out it wasn't. John McTiernan, who has directed great films like Die Hard and Predator and The Hunt for Red October, The Last Action Hero, Die Hard with a Vengeance. He pretty much went on a tear of modern day blockbusters. So much so that he pretty much hates them. This little interview he did shows, and he also called Hollywood a fascist system. Let's backtrack a little bit. So every once in a while, someone in Hollywood or that has worked with Hollywood and has kind of disappeared or chosen a different lifestyle will go out of their way to say how they hate or dislike the Hollywood system. And it's usually just that. It's usually just things that they hate. It's usually just things that they don't like how things are made, or that the field is crowded by too many. I'm using quotation marks. You can't see it, obviously. Superhero movies. But then someone comes along and says just a little bit too much, and they say just a little bit that's like, maybe you shouldn't have said that, or calm it down a little bit. Which, of course, people who are reading this will probably ask the question, I don't think that person ever wants to work in Hollywood again. That was what I thought when, again, I read John McTiernan's, I think I'm saying his last name wrong, but it doesn't matter. His thoughts on modern day blockbuster films. In an interview with Premiere, which was translated from the French, McTiernan went on a tear beginning with this, saying, I hate the majority of major studio films for political reasons. I can't really watch them. I'm annoyed the second they start. Which, of course, would draw the question, well, why are you watching modern day blockbusters if you hate them so much? There are other films, there are indie films that you can watch, or there are films that go straight to DVD that are done probably by, big studios, but you don't have to watch big studio films. But, whatever. Even the beloved one, like George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road, which was pretty much universally beloved by many fans, was not safe and was dismissed with a simple response of, that's right. He didn't like Mad Max Fury Road, which is fine. There's people out there that watched it and didn't like it, but I don't think I've ever heard the answer. However, his biggest problem was apparently with Captain America, saying, Captain America, I'm not joking, the cult of American hyper-masculinity is one of the worst things to have ever happened to the world during the last 50 years. Hundreds of thousands of people have died because of this idiotic delusion. So how is it possible to watch a film called Captain America? Now, you can't fully disagree with what he's saying. And I don't really fully agree with his comment, considering that Captain America was created at a time when morale in America was, let's just say, not the best. And the character has meant a lot of things for a lot of people since then, and during the time he was created. Now, his feelings don't end with Captain America. He says the problem is with the fascist studio industry, and that, quote, superhero movies are for business, end quote. Now, yes, superhero movies have become massively successfully, popular and financially successful for studios that are making them. Now, the studios look at them as big money makers, obviously. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people making them don't love doing them. Marvel, that's pretty much all they do is superhero movies, and I'm sure, and I'm not sure, I am sure that everyone involved loves making them. Kevin Feige loves these characters. Is he rolling around in money like Scrooge McDuck? Of course he is, because all those movies are highly successful, but they're also popular, and a lot of people like them. Not all of them, but big majority of them. And there's people out there, like maybe people that have the same mentality as McTiernan, who do not like superhero movies at all, which is fine. Not for you. Don't go watch them. But he continued saying, all they're making are comic book adaptations. There's action, but no human beings. There are films made by fascists. They're making all these kids in the world think that they'll never be important enough to have a film made about their life. And it's a unique moment in history of cinema. It didn't used to be like this. A kid used to be able to learn how a man or a woman should act by watching films. Morals. Comics make heroes for businesses. Now everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm pretty sure I said that earlier. If I didn't, I'm saying it now. And it should be noted that McTiernan, has been working in Hollywood since the 80s. So he comes from a different time in Hollywood where they didn't used to think of, we need a franchise. We need a tentpole movie that's going to make us a shit ton of money. So people, we got to make a movie to get butts in the seats. He comes from a different time. And he even looks like a bitter old man. You look at a picture of John McTiernan, he looks like a bitter old man. However, he's entitled to his opinion. Now, are kids going out and, putting themselves in caves and building an Iron Man suit of scraps? No. Are kids nowadays looking for a super soldier serum? No. If you're letting your kid watch a movie so he can learn how to be a man or a woman in this case, that's bad parenting. Maybe it was different back then. Maybe there was messages in these old films saying, hey, kids, do the right thing. Which is also the name of a movie. But, look, I read this and I literally read his comments like 3 times to see if there was some sort of hidden meaning in what he was saying. And there isn't. He just went in and said, I flat out hate all superhero movies because they're made by fascists and superhero movies are only just for businesses. So the studios can make a lot of money. And they're not teaching kids anything. You can argue that's not true. And I would argue that's maybe somewhat not true. Now, again, I mentioned that I didn't fully agree with what he said. But there are things that he said that are true. Modern day blockbusters, studios just get people in seats. So they're going to make this big spectacle of a movie, and it's going to end on this big, final third act where buildings are coming down and the hero's going to do his thing or the heroine's going to do her thing, and there you go. You get this big, massive set piece that can mean nothing. Doesn't teach you anything. That's true. It's true. Not all, obviously. I don't think that Hollywood is made by fascists. It's probably not the word I would use. But, I mentioned, what was it, when I was talking about Ghost in the Shell remake. Hollywood's a business. Now, there are movies out there that teach kids, that will probably teach kid morals. If you want your kid to learn how to be a man or a woman, I don't think you should be letting your kids watch a movie to teach them that. I think that relies on the parents. But, if that's your thing, then that's your thing. I just don't agree with his comments saying that, that kids, that's the thing that got me, the kids part. For some reason, that's the one that got me. That's the one that just it made me angry for some reason when I first read it. Not because he was bashing superhero movies, but because of the kid thing. I don't know. I'm just going to move on. Now, it should be noted that McTiernan, who hasn't directed a film since 2003. That's right. He hasn't directed a film in over 10 years. The last film he directed was Basic, which was the movie with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, if you need to be reminded of that. And it wasn't because he was tired of the way the political system in Hollywood was working. No. It was because he went to jail.
Say what?
And he went to jail for hiring a private investigator to spy on a producer and allegedly also his estranged wife at the time, who had a disagreement with that said producer during the production of Rollerball, the remake, which was, I've already sworn on this podcast, so I'll keep swearing, a piece of shit. That movie was terrible. Don't ever watch it. There are movies that I will never recommend to anyone, even people that I hate, and that is one of them. And he also went to jail for the same time for lying and withholding information from the FBI. There's this whole case. This whole case is online. If you want to go check it out, I highly recommend you do, because it is a crazy story of why he went to jail and what was going on. And I think I read this. One of the judges said that he thought Mkhitaryan was above the law, and it kind of looks like it just a little bit. Again, he looks like a bitter old man, but he also looks like kind of that kind of guy was like, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want. I don't care if it's against the law, which apparently he did. Anyway, even with him hating the way he does, he did say that he does like movies. He doesn't mind some big studio movies. He liked Argo, which is the Ben Affleck movie, and he likes Joel Silver movies. And he went on to go, praise Affleck, saying that he did an incredible job and he gets better in every time. He even compared him to John Ford, the famous director from back in the day. So again, I mean, it's hard to talk about this without getting really angry, and it's also hard to talk about it because it's so out there. I mean, he calls them fascists. I've never in my life, since I've been following the movie news, have seen someone call people in Hollywood fascists. That's the first time that I've ever seen anyone go this hard on modern day. I mean, you got people that have gone against superhero films or the way that films are created. Steven Spielberg has said that superhero movies are probably going to die out. Alejandro Iñárritu has come out and said that he doesn't want to do a superhero movie because of reasons. I forgot the reasons, what the reasons were, but he said he doesn't want to do one, which is fine. I mean, but the way they went about it, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, we're bad, the terrible fascists movies that were created by fascists. That's kind of how he sounds like. But they weren't saying that. They were doing it more politely in a way, and they were making it, and the way that they went about it made sense for them. Mkhitaryan, on the other hand, just doesn't flat out like anything. Hollywood isn't perfect, and obviously we have talked about on the podcast, and you guys have seen it. If you follow the movie news cycle like I do, you've seen it. But calm the hell down, dude. Seriously, just settle down. All right, so let's talk about this week's movie news. Again, it was a slow week this week because I think studios are just holding back their movie news because of Comic-Con. Comic-Con's going on. The big studios are going to Comic-Con, and they're gonna be releasing all their big news items for their big projects. So this week was a little light on the news items. We're not gonna talk about all the movie news items that came out this week. If you want to know and keep up with the movie news items that came out this week, Facebook page. Just go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/moviepit, and you guys can see them there, and you guys can go and check that out. But let's get to the movie news items that came out this week. The Goldfinch novel gets an adaptation and director. Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch has gotten a lot of acclaim since it was released back in 2014. It received the Pulitzer Prize and high praise from a lot of big publications, one of them being the New York Times. And now the film adaptation has a director in John Crowley. Now, Crowley directed the equally much praised film Brooklyn last year, which was one of my favorite films of last year as well. And the novel, for those of you not familiar, The Goldfinch follows a 13-year-old New Yorker, Theo Decker, who loses his mother in an accident and is abandoned by his father. He is taken in by a wealthy family living in Manhattan's Park Avenue, and Theo struggles to find his place, so he clings to a mysterious pain that reminds him of his mother. There he starts to throw himself into the underground art scene. Now, the book has been popping up. A lot of people that I know that are big book readers, and it seems like everyone around me is reading it. And like I mentioned, the book is getting a lot of attention. So it seems like Warner Brothers, who is releasing the movie, is hoping to capitalize on the success of the novel and the people that are just getting around to reading it. And Crowley is a great director. Brooklyn was one of my favorite films last year. I think he did a tremendous job with just the film in general and getting great performances out of his leads. So there's that. The next news item. Sticking with adaptations of books, Kirsten Dunst is set to make her directorial debut with The Bell Jar, that also has Dakota Fanning set to star. Kirsten Dunst returned to the spotlight with a performance in FX's Fargo, which earned her a Golden Globe nomination. And she also appeared in the great indie film Midnight Special, which I believe we may have talked about on the podcast. Not positive. If I didn't, I really love the Midnight Special. If you get a chance to watch it, you really should. And now Dunst will step behind the camera, making her feature film directorial debut. She's directed some short films that I don't think have been released. They're short films, so short films usually don't get released too much. But the short films have starred people like John Hawkes and Lucas Haas and Winona Ryder. So she's not just, she's not jumping in the deep end of the directing pool. She has a couple short films under her belt. So she's going to direct The Bell Jar, which is an adaptation of Sylvia Plath's 1963 novel of the same name. Now, The Bell Jar, just a little bit of history here, is the only book that was published when Plath was still alive and before she committed suicide that same year in 1963. And it tells the story of Esther Greenwood, who takes an internship at a magazine in New York City in the 1950s. However, when she returns home to Boston, she falls victim to mental illness. And the novel, not the film hasn't come out yet. The novel has been adapted before in 1979, but the novel itself is one of those books that everyone talks about and is very special and near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and it helped a lot of people around the time with mental illness. Of course, it didn't help the fact that the person who wrote it was probably suffering from her own mental illness and unfortunately committed suicide. But the book, very popular. It's very acclaimed, and it's one of those books that I'm surprised hasn't been adapted or more, considering some of the stuff I read about it when this news came out. The film again will be directed by Kirsten Dunst, and the film already has a star in Dakota Fanning. Dakota Fanning will play the main character of Esther Greenwood. Now, Dunst will also work on the script, and the plan at the moment is to start production early next year. And it seems like it's going to be an independent film unless a big studio picks it up. But I'll keep you updated on The Bell Jar if anything pops up with that. Sticking with book news, Margot Robbie joins the Bad Monkeys adaptation. Margot Robbie, of course, has been making a name for herself since pretty much debuting in The Wolf of Wall Street. And, she's been doing all these projects here and there. She was just in The Legend of Tarzan. She was in Focus, which did pretty good in. Not a lot of people saw, but she was pretty great in that. And of course, she's done other stuff. And of course, she will be Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad. Of course, we'll talk about Suicide Squad more once the film gets closer to release. But Robbie has been signing on to multiple films lately. She's also going to produce a couple of those films. And now it looks like she's going to produce and star in one more film that is based off a book of Matt Ruff's novel Bad Monkeys. Now, Robbie will star and produce in the adaptation that tells of a woman named Jane Charlotte who makes it difficult for readers to figure out if she's sane, psychotic, or a liar. After she's arrested for a murder, Jane tells police she's part of a secret organization called Department of the Final Deposition of Irredeemable Persons, also called Bad Monkeys. Though she denies the charges, her statement sends her to a psychiatric wing where professionals examine her and try to make sense of her story. Now, the project sounds pretty cool. It's still in the very early stages, and Robbie, of course, being set to star and produce, it could, jump to a number of people's list of must-see films, since Margot Robbie is a very fantastic and great actress. So far, she hasn't really done anything bad. She's pretty likable too. So I don't know. This could be another film that Margot Robbie can, expand her horizons in. We're assuming that she's probably playing the main character of Jane Charlotte. We'll find out. Alright, and the final book news, in a way, I guess, is the Divergent series Ascendant is going to conclude with a TV movie and potential spin-off series. That's right, Divergent fans. You may not be seeing the last film of the franchise in theaters if Lionsgate goes through with their plan. Now, the Divergent books were, again, a little history lesson for you guys. The Divergent books were meant to be pretty much essentially the new Hunger Games. Hunger Games was on its way out, and the Divergent films were going to, take over the mantle and, have Lionsgate, just roll around in money. However, Divergent wasn't nearly as successful as the studio would have liked, and was not nearly as successful as the Hunger Games. The first film wasn't met with much wasn't not met with much fanfare and or critical acclaim, and only hauled in $54.6 million its opening weekend. And considering there are three films in total, it was the highest grossing opening day of the three films. That's kind of sad. And it gets sadder. The sequels, The Surgeon and Allegiant, bought in less than that, and Allegiant, being the last film, only bought in $29 million its opening weekend and opened in theaters at number 2. And the overall gross for the films have been getting lower and lower, like I mentioned, and the fanfare for the franchise is, and was, nowhere near the Hunger Games when it was going strong. So it was pretty much a crash and burn in all accounts. It also didn't help that Allegiant only earned, the last film by the way, $179.2 million worldwide. And pre-production on the final film, Ascendant, was already, getting underway. They were expected to start filming this summer. I assume, they were going to start filming now or relatively soon if they just bought this up. But it didn't help when Allegiant director Robert Schwentke, I think that's how you say his last name, dropped out of directing the final film, and Lionsgate bought in Lee Toland Krieger, who directed films like Celeste and Jesse Forever and The Age of Adeline. But it didn't help because now Lionsgate is expecting and planning on finishing the franchise with a TV movie that will finalize the storylines involving the current cast and introduce a new cast who would then continue on with a TV series adaptation on either a traditional network or a streaming service. Now the plan is in the early stages, and it's not yet clear if the main cast of Shailene Woodley, Theo James, Ansel Elgort, Miles Teller, and others would return for a TV movie. Now some people are saying it's highly doubtful, considering that they would have to take a huge pay cut since it's now a TV movie. And who knows if their contracts will even allow for a TV series, considering that Lionsgate will still handle the distribution, but they were handing off the production control to another division within their studio. Either way, this is a huge blow for Lionsgate, obviously, and more importantly, for the failed franchise. I mean, this was a franchise that people and studios were looking at as, again, the new Hunger Games. And this is a time when, all these young adults novels were getting adapted, or the rights were getting nabbed up because they saw the success of the Hunger Games. Harry Potter was already on its way out. Twilight was on its way out. Hunger Games was the new big thing, and it was starting to wrap up to finish. Divergent was going to be pretty much the last of the old guard, to say the least, before these new films were coming in. Didn't work out. Huge miscalculation. Now, usually if a franchise fails to get off the ground, they just, they never do the sequel or the sequels or whatever. But this is a pretty big blow. And I've never actually seen this happen. I don't think it's really actually ever happened, at least from what I can remember. The only one that I can remember, and this is something that there were some of the reports have been also saying, was The Mortal Instruments. That was a movie that came out, forgot what year it came out, but it came out, and that didn't do so well in the box office either. And that one stung even more because when the movie was still in theaters, they were already filming the second one. They were very early on in the process of filming the second movie when they said, yeah, we're not doing the second movie anymore. And they just shut everything down. And now The Mortal Instruments is a TV show on Freeform. So that was a low for them. But this is an even bigger low because at least the Virgin series got past the first movie. We should get a better idea of how this will happen, if it will happen. We don't know who will come back, who won't come back. Probably sooner rather than later, considering, again, they were supposed to start filming this summer, and the summer's almost over. It's already July. We'll find out. But, again, box office numbers being taken into consideration, it looked like fans weren't really that interested anyway, it appeared. I mean, I'm sure fans of the book went to go watch the movie. They were probably the only ones going to go watch the movies, which is not really what you want when you're hoping to start and end a new franchise. I feel kind of bad for the Virgin series. I really do. I only watched the first one because my sister dragged me out to go watch it. And I wasn't that interested. I really wasn't. And it it does sting when I see stuff like this, because I know people are always hoping like, oh, I hope this fails. I'm not that kind of person, because I know how much work goes into making a movie, and I think people sometimes forget that. They don't really consider the people behind the camera too much. They only think about the people in front of the camera. If a movie sucks, they usually blame the lead. Sometimes they'll blame the director, and it's not always their fault. Sometimes it could be the writer's fault, or sometimes it could be just, it's equal blame for everyone. But it does sting a little bit when I read stuff like this, because I know how much hard work goes into a movie, and even though I didn't like the film and the sequels, just watching the trailers didn't really look like they were good films. I liked the cast. Everyone involved was or is, they're not dead, is pretty good hard workers. So it sucks to see them being affected by this. Alright, so let's move away from the book news and let's talk about Van Helsing. Move away from book news and let's talk about a character that was introduced in a book. The Van Helsing reboot, which will be done over at Universal Pictures, and Van Helsing, the character, will be a part of the Universal Pictures Monsters universe, is apparently inspired by Mad Max. Now, again, the Universal Pictures Monsters universe has been slowly getting established. The Mummy will come out next year, and already has Tom Cruise set to star in the lead role, with the Mummy character being played by Sofia Boutella. Johnny Depp will play the Invisible Man, at least for the time being. Who knows if that's still going to happen. Russell Crowe will play Dr. Jekyll. Javier Bardem is in talks to play Frankenstein's creature. And the studio is looking at Angelina Jolie to play the Bride of Frankenstein, and The Rock is being eyed to play the Wolfman. But two projects that are in the lineup, or apparently in the lineup, that have not been talked about at all are The Creature from the Black Lagoon and Van Helsing. And obviously, since I mentioned Van Helsing, we're going to be talking about Van Helsing. The reboot is being written by Eric Hezier and John Spaths, and Hezier, who co-wrote the upcoming film Lights Out, which we'll talk about a little bit later, spoke to HitFix, telling the outlet that Mad Max is a major source of inspiration, saying, "I can only say that early on our inspiration for his behavior and mannerisms was all in Mad Max." Now, it does say early on, which could mean that they moved on from that, or that maybe they've toned it down a bit, or maybe it's still there, but it's not going to be as prominent as what we know from the Mad Max character at all. He does go on to say that the Universal Monsters universe will dive into different genres, saying, "It's the early days right now. I can say that the decision that a lot of us made was to go and just write the best movie we could on our own quarter and make sure it's good on its own, and didn't necessarily need to link arm in arm with everyone else, and to be totally different from the other films. One may be a little bit more comedic, action adventure-y, one can be very much a traditional horror piece, that kind of thing. And we'll see what happens as the projects evolve and we all get a chance to convey and talk and make sure that the movies feel like they're all in the same world." Now, the "we" he keeps talking about is the writer's room that Universal put together. Now, the whole universe, Monsters universe, was being developed by Alex Kurtzman, who has had a hand in the Star Trek movies and the Transformers films, and Chris Morgan, who has written the Fast and Furious films since Tokyo Drift, or after Tokyo Drift, I should say. The other writers in the writer's room are Aaron Guzikowski, who wrote Prisoners, and Ed Solomon wrote the Men in Black films, and finally Noah Hawley, who has written the FX series Fargo. Now, they're all in the writer's room, so this is a pretty impressive writer's room, to be honest. And I like the idea that the films won't necessarily be the same genre. I think that's a good way to go about it. But, like you said, they all need to feel like they're connected to the same universe. And I think with Universal behind them and the writer's room being as impressive as they are, that probably won't be a problem. Now, I'm still on board for the shared universe. I mentioned last week when we talked about Javier Bardem's potential casting as the Frankenstein creature that I'm all for it. And, we know that Hollywood is in the states of, creating franchises and shared universes. But these creatures, these universal creatures of Dracula, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, they were all really, if you want to look at it, the original shared universe because a lot of them were in the same movies together, or turned out to be in the same movies together. So this was really the original shared universe. Marvel didn't create it. They maybe perfected it, if you want to. You can say that for argument's sake, but they didn't create it. So I like the idea. Hopefully it turns out great. Asmer Van Helsing being inspired by Mad Max. Again, it's still early on. They're still writing the script. We don't know how the character is going to turn out in the final version, but I guess this is a good way to start off. I don't know. We'll find out. The live-action Pokemon movie has finally found a studio, and here's a potential story idea that the movie will have. Last week, it was announced that Legendary Pictures was close to nabbing the live-action rights to the Pokemon film, and that indeed will be the case, as Legendary has indeed landed the rights for the popular series. And it looks like we may have found out exactly what the film will be about, or at least somewhat about. According to Deadline, the film will follow Detective Pikachu. That's right, you heard me. Detective Pikachu.
Son of a bitch.
Which was introduced in a Japanese game called Great Detective Pikachu that came out earlier this year. Now, for those not in the know, pretty sure you probably can guess what the game is about. It follows Pikachu as a Sherlock Holmes type character who helps solve mysteries, along with a human that can actually understand what Pikachu is saying because, Pokemon have their own languages. Now, the direction may not be what a lot of fans were hoping for. I think a lot of fans were kind of hoping for the traditional, story of Pokemon, following a young trainer who, gets a Pokemon and tries to work up the ranks of, the Pokemon world and league and other trainers and gym leaders. But Detective Pikachu? Really? I mean, yes, you kind of have to have Pikachu. Pikachu is essentially the poster boy for Pokemon. He is the main face of Pokemon. But Detective Pikachu, I don't know if that's really the way to go. I mean, if they can make it work, more power to them. If they can sell Detective Pikachu being the main focus of the movie, then okay, fine, do it. But I don't know. I don't think that's the best way. I mean, that's the best way to go. I mean, I mentioned last week that the Pokemon movie has to have a lot of things go right for it to work. One of them was being who they bought in, director, writer, producers, all of it. The other thing was the CGI, which I mentioned, which I think that's pretty much a given. But I don't know, man. I think a live action Pokemon movie, the first move is to make a Detective Pikachu. I don't think that's. I mean, that could be like a good maybe side story or maybe like a DVD extra. I don't know, man. Again, if they can make it work and they can sell people on it, then again, more power to them. I'm still gonna go watch the Pokemon movie. I almost said Pikachu movie. The Pokemon movie when it comes out in theaters because it's Pokemon. But I don't know if this is the best way to go about your first movie. We'll probably find out more in the coming days thanks to Comic-Con, since Legendary will be at Comic-Con. Alright, final news item of the podcast, or at least at the time of this recording. Star Trek 4 has been officially announced, and it will bring back Chris Hemsworth. Now, before that, though, there's another little brief news item that came out. Of course, last month. I can't believe it's been a month. I think I mentioned this last week, too. I can't believe it's been a month. Anton Yelchin sadly passed away. And, of course, he played one of the main characters in Chekhov. And it was bound to happen. The question was asked, what's going to happen to the character of Chekhov? And J.J. Abrams was asked that question, and I can only imagine, what they've been trying to think about. And he gave an answer to Post Media Network, saying that they're not going to replace Anton Yelchin as Chekhov. This is his actual quote saying, "I would say there's no replacing him. There's no recasting. I can't possibly imagine that, and I think Anton deserves better." And, again, he mentioned that they're working very hard to see what they're going to do. He brought up questions: did we kill him off? Did we just write him off? And I think, killing him off probably won't be the best idea. I think writing him off would probably be better, but obviously acknowledging the fact that he's, not there would also, be something that they should do. So if you're worried about that, don't have to be. The next bit, like I mentioned, Star Trek 4 is officially a go. Star Trek Beyond comes out this week, and it was, it's not really that rare that a sequel is announced. I mean, it is rare, but it's becoming more of a thing now, where a sequel is announced before the film comes out in theaters, and usually that's because they're getting positive early reviews, or the test screenings were really good. And in this case, Star Trek Beyond was getting a lot of positive early reviews, so the studio probably saw that as a way of saying, you know what? We're going to make Star Trek 4. Doesn't matter how Star Trek Beyond does. So Star Trek 4 is now greenlit, and a big casting announcement has been attached to it, and that is that Chris Hemsworth will appear in Star Trek 4 playing the character he played in the 2009 reboot, George Kirk, aka Captain Kirk's father. The log line for Star Trek 4, since they released that as well, also reads as follows, and this will give you a little bit of maybe what the film is about, maybe how they're going to go about bringing the character back in. He's saying, in the next installment of the epic space adventure, Chris Pine's Captain Kirk will cross paths with a man he never had a chance to meet, but whose legacy has haunted him since the day he was born, his father. So for those down in the know, again, I mentioned, Chris Hemsworth played his father in the first film, the first reboot film, back in 2009. Chris Hemsworth, before he became a household name, he played James Kirk. He was his father in the great opening scene in the film, and that was it. And it looks like they're bringing him back. When I read the news, because the news of his Hemsworth casting came out before Star Trek 4 was officially announced, I kind of asked the question on the Facebook page, how are they going to bring him back? Are they going to do some time travel? Are they going to do some time disruptions? Flashbacks, which, Star Trek is known for, but I don't know how they're going to do it. And that just leads to more questions. Flashbacks may be a little bit out of the question since since the logline says they're going to meet face to face, or they're across paths. So it should be interesting to see how they bring this. They do this. Do they bring back just his father? Did they maybe bring back his mother? Because there's been no talk of James Kirk's mother, who was played by Jennifer Morrison in the first film. We'll see. We'll find out. Either way, I think this is great. I think Hemsworth coming back is a pretty cool move. I think that's, again, it's just interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it. The cast is expected to return, of course, without Anton Yelchin, sadly. But Justin Lin, who directed Star Trek Beyond, is not yet confirmed to return either. But Abrams will come back to be a producer on the film. Simon Pegg and Doug Jung, who wrote Star Trek Beyond, will, at least at the moment, not be writing Star Trek 4. That job will go to the original Star Trek Beyond writers, DJ Payne and Patrick McKay, who were replaced by Pegg and Jung before production started. No word yet on when the film will go into production, but to hold us over, we got Star Trek Beyond, and we have the new Star Trek show, which will premiere in January of next year. So Trekkies, we're all good. Alright, so let's talk about this week's releases. We have 2 limited releases, 2 big ones anyway. First one is Don't Think Twice. When a member of a popular New York City improv troupe gets a huge break, the rest of the group, all best friends, start to realize that not everyone is going to make it after all. The film stars Mike Birbiglia, I think that's how you say his name. He also directed the film. Keegan-Michael Key, Kate McCucci, Jillian Jacobs, and Tammy Sager. The film looks pretty funny. I saw the trailer when it first came out. I was about to say a couple of weeks ago. That's not true. When it first came out, and it looks pretty cool. It looks really funny. I hope I get a chance to go watch it. And the next limited release is the absolutely famous The Movie, based on the show of the same name, after attracting both media and police attention for accidentally knocking Kate Moss into the River Thames and Patsy hideouts in the south of France. This is apparently based off a TV show that was popular, I guess. Never even heard of it. I've seen the trailer 3 times now in theaters, and every time I've seen it, I cannot wait for the trailer to be over. I've never heard of the TV show. The trailer just didn't interest me at all. I don't know. I'm sure it will make money, and I'm sure fans of the TV show will go out to watch the movie. But the trailer just it didn't get me at all. All right, so let's talk about this week's wide releases. we have 3. The first one is Ice Age Collision Course, another Ice Age installment. Manny, Diego, and Sid join up with Buck to fend off a meteor strike that could destroy the world. The voice cast includes, I'm not just gonna name some of them. I'm not gonna name all of them because it's a pretty big voice cast. Ray Romano, John Leguizamo, Dennis Leary, Queen Latifah, Jennifer Lopez, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Nick Offerman, Keke Palmer, Josh Peck, Simon Pegg, Sean William Scott, and Wanda Sykes. It looks funny. I mean, I haven't watched an Ice Age movie since I think the third one. That was the last one I watched. I watched part of the fourth one. I was kind of half paying attention. I didn't watch it in theaters, obviously. But yeah, and then this one, it looks pretty funny. I mean, it's an Ice Age movie. I think what hurts the franchise a little bit is the fact that the movies don't follow a certain trend of being released every year or every 2 years. That's kind of like they kind of push them back a little bit. But I'm sure it'll make a lot of money because it's an Ice Age movie, and kids need to go to the movies and go watch. Kids love Ice Age. So, all right, the next film is Lights Out, based on the short film of the same name by David S. Sandberg, who will also make his feature film debut. The movie is about when her little brother, Martin, played by Gabriel Bateman, experiences the same events that once tested her sanity. Rebecca, played by Teresa Palmer, works to unlock the truth behind the terror, which brings her face to face with an entity that has an attachment to their mother, played by her mother, Sophia, played by Maria Bello. The film also stars Alexander DePersia and Billy Burke. Lights Out looks fantastic. It's getting great reviews. I cannot wait to watch this movie. I saw the original short film when it came out. Well, around the time it came out. I didn't watch it when it first came out, but it was like a week after it came out. I kept hearing about it, and I never watched it, and then I finally watched it. And I watched it at night, like an idiot. Really, with the speakers turned up and everything, and I just freaked out. And I was not the same ever since. I watched the original short film. I cannot wait to see what they do with this. I'm really happy that David F. Sandberg is coming back to direct, essentially his short film in a bigger medium and bigger stage. You got James Wan producing the film, which is really great. And the film, again, the film looks really, really creepy. Looks terrifying. Nothing but great reviews. Early on, great reviews. So I cannot wait to go watch this movie. I really can't. But the next film, which I can't wait to see either, is Star Trek Beyond. Of course, we've been talking about Star Trek. Directed by Justin Lim, the USS Enterprise crew explores the furthest reaches of uncharted space, where they encounter a new ruthless enemy who puts them and everything the Federation stands for to the test. Of course, the film stars Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, Simon Pegg, John Cho, the late Anton Yelchin, Idris Elba, and Sofia Boutella. The film looks great. Again, early reviews have been very positive, and I can't wait to watch it. I love the Star Trek, the first film, the reboot in 2009. Star Trek Into Darkness gets a lot of hate, but overall it was pretty enjoyable. I had a fun time watching it. But Star Trek Beyond looks fantastic, and again, all these early reviews that have been really positive. It says that it brings back the heart and spirit of Star Trek, but also is its own thing. And I again just can't wait to watch this movie. All right, so those are your 3 films: Star Trek Beyond, Lights Out, and Ice Age Collision Course. The 2 limited releases are Don't Think Twice and Absolutely Famous the Movie. So let's get to this week's box office predictions. Last week I was wrong. I was wrong on the last movie, on number 5. So I'm kind of okay with that. My picks last week were The Secret Life of Pets at number 1, Ghostbusters at number 2, Legend of Tarzan at number 3, number 4 was Finding Dory, and number 5, The Infiltrator. Those were my picks. But the actual box office last week: The Secret Life of Pets, Ghostbusters, The Legend of Tarzan, Finding Dory, and Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. The Infiltrator landed in the number 8 spot, so there's that. I got that wrong, but I'm okay. One wrong. That's fine. So this week's picks they're gonna be a little bit tough. We got 3 movies that are gonna make I can say probably a lot of bank in the box office, and I think I'm putting a lot of faith in one movie more than probably more people will admit. But I'm gonna do it anyway. So my picks this week, Star Trek Beyond will be number 1. Number 2 will be Lights Out. Number 3 will be Ice Age Collision Course. Number 4 will be Secret Life of Pets. And number 5, Ghostbusters. Those are my picks this week. I'm putting a lot of faith in Lights Out, but I think Lights Out. I think there's the horror crowd will definitely hopefully will go see it, and I hope a lot of other people will go watch it as well. It's a horror movie. It's a horror movie in the middle of summer. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. And Star Trek Beyond, again, it's known franchise. Again, positive buzz all around. Ice Age Collision Course is the new animated film, and I think enough people, I think people that have already watched The Secret Life of Pets are going to move on and bring their kids to the new animated film. So, and Ghostbusters, I think, will still have enough leeway and be in the top 5. I watched Ghostbusters. I mentioned last week that I was going to watch it, and I did a review up for it. I barely put it up the other day because I forgot, and I liked it. Ghostbusters, it wasn't perfect, but it was good, and you should give it a chance because it's pretty good. I mean, it is. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. Go watch it. And I also watched Legend of Tarzan the other day, and it was all right too. It wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be. Had some weird editing issues, but overall it was okay. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to our Star Trek Beyond. I'm looking forward to Lights Out. I'm going to be watching those 2 this weekend for sure. Hell, I might even throw in Ice Age just for the hell of it. Who knows? But we'll see. So that being said, if you want to go read my review for Ghostbusters and any other movie that I review, you can go to movieswithchris.wordpress.com. Link will be down below. So you guys can check that out. Also, go give me a like on the Facebook page at facebook.com/moviepit. Link will also be down below just in case. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. It was, a short movie news week, pretty much just because of Comic-Con. But again, next week we'll be doing a podcast devoted to Comic-Con, and maybe we'll have another separate podcast as well. If not, we'll combine the 2 and just make an extra long podcast next week, because why not, right? Of course, if any big news items come out after the podcast has come out, you can go to the Facebook page and check it out. And yes, be sure also to check out the links to the trailers that came out this week down below. We have the first trailer to Triple X, The Return of Xander Cage. It looks utterly ridiculously dumb fun. That's the best way I can put it. It looks utterly ridiculous, but I will put it one way. It looks like he's riding a motorcycle on a wave. That's it. Just go watch it. That's what it is. The new trailer for The Magnificent Seven looks great. Looks way better than I thought it was going to look. That's probably my favorite trailer of the week. But also, there's Kanye in it. The Kanye bit doesn't come until the very end of the trailer, but overall the trailer looks great and the movie looks awesome. I can't wait to watch it. Comes out in September. We'll obviously talk about that on the podcast once we get closer to the release date. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week once again. Next week we'll be doing potentially 2 podcasts, one devoted to Comic-Con and the other one devoted to what we usually do, the movie news, or at least the rest of the movie news. And be sure to check out my WordPress account for reviews of Star Trek Beyond and Lights Out this weekend. And just be safe. Again, it's a hot one. I think it's going to be hot pretty much everywhere in the States. So just stay hydrated, be careful. And yeah, go just, again, stay hydrated, be careful, stay in cool areas. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast for the 3rd time. And as always, guys, be safe and go watch some movies.